listen to this stat. 72% of 5-stars are committed. The latest, a win for Ole Miss. What it means and who's next. And we're making a trip down to Georgia to find out how the #1 player fared in his senior season opener. Now, the stats were not eye-popping, but our analyst was there and tells us how that was only part of the story. Plus, we're breaking down some of the top plays of the weekend in high school action and handing out our recruit of the weekend. That and more as the college football recruiting show starts right now. Alongside national recruiting analyst Cooper Patagna, I am Emily Proud. Our thoughts are with our friend Blair Angulo as he battles some weather out west, but he is actually going to be in the chat today. So if you have any West Coast questions, highly recommend you drop those. If you have any questions for this guy, submit them, please. We got the only way you can do that, though, is by subscribing to the 247 Sports YouTube channel. So absolutely hit that subscribe button. And there's one more button I have to ask you to hit, and that is the like button, so we know that you're watching. It is time for us to hit some of those headlines in the world of recruiting. Uncommitted 5-stars, they're becoming few and far between. Another coming off the board Saturday as defensive lineman Camarion Franklin picking Ole Miss over Auburn and Miami. The Rebs are now in the top 25 of the rankings. He is the #2 player in the Magnolia State. But what kind of guy did Lane Kiffin just add?
Well, he got a big dude, 6'5", 265 pounds, 19 sacks on the edge last season. But I think a guy who's going to end up working his way inside also has a little bit of a basketball background. Don't look now. You look at Ole Miss, what they've done in the state of Mississippi. Jeffrey Rush Jr., Cameron Beavers as well. You love what defensive coordinator Pete Golding has brought over from Alabama, and Lane Kiffin's got to be really happy about it.
Certainly doing well in state. Also happening over the weekend, 4-star offensive tackle Blake Ivy committing to Texas A&M. Ivy is the '9 tackle in 2024. The Aggies now 6th in the team recruiting rankings. But what do we need to know about the latest member of this class?
Well, he's a shade under 6'4", 280 pounds, and I love his developmental upside. I actually think he's going to play guard at the next level, but he's got a 7'1" wingspan. He's got 36-inch arms. If you don't know anything about size and how it relates to football, this is very good. So I like this pickup for Texas A&M. They already got a guy in Chase Basanis that they like a lot from New Jersey. So you add in Blake Ivy. I love what they're doing at the point of attack. This is a big one for A&M that we haven't talked about much.
7-foot wings? That is insane. All right, let's move on to a Crimson Tide legacy commitment. That's right, 2024 safety Dre Kirkpatrick Jr. is ready to follow in his father's footsteps in Tuscaloosa. What kind of player is Nick Saban's? This is his first ever legacy recruit.
High football intelligence, a lot like his dad, position versatile guy that can play on the back end. He can also play nickel. He's got a knack for the football and being around the football as well. I really love the way he plays the game. I think football intelligence, instincts, when you watch a player like Drake Kirkpatrick Jr., those are the things that stick out with him. And he's a guy who plays safety in the deep hash. I think he overcompensates. If you want to knock his speed a little bit, I think that's fair. But in terms of the way he plays the game, he plays and he processes very quickly. So a guy that I think he's going to have a seamless transition, whether it be special teams or defense. He's going to have a pretty quick path to the field in Tuscaloosa.
Probably knows what he's getting into, too, with his dad's experience. All right, final one. 5-star defensive lineman Eddrick Houston is set to announce tomorrow right here on the 247 Sports YouTube page. The Georgia talent will choose between Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, USC, and, of course, the in-state Dogs. Whoever gets him gets what?
Well, I love watching him play. I mean, this guy is, he wreaks havoc, right? You watch him play against St. Francis Academy on Friday. That was a game that a lot of people had their eyes on. He can play the 4-eye or 3 technique, depending on the scheme. I think this is a guy so explosive, really technically refined with his hands as well. Another guy that I think just physically, and especially being in that program at a Buford in Georgia, is going to be ready to play, I think, immediately and contribute at the next level fairly quickly.
Time now for the Wiltfong whiparound with our director of recruiting, Steve Wiltfong. Steve, we just talked about it. Eddrick Houston ready to make his decision, but you have been ready for quite some time with a crystal ball pick in favor of the Buckeyes. That's been in since June. We are now less than 24 hours away from his decision. How are you feeling?
Still like the Buckeyes for Eddrick Houston going into his decision. on Tuesday. That's kind of been his dream school for much of the process. Loves the way they develop players, loves Larry Johnson's track record, has really enjoyed his time up in Columbus, has built a bond with players and commits. And so I think that Ohio State's in excellent position to put together one of the best defensive line classes this cycle. They already have 5-star defensive lineman Justin Scott in the fold. Like the way it's trending for Eddrick Houston here, as schools like Alabama and USC also prominently in the mix for him here down the stretch.
Steve, David Stone, the 5-star from IMG Academy, one of the most sought-out prospects in all of the country. You got Oklahoma, Miami, Michigan State. They're all in the mix for David Stone. A lot of people are waiting on this one. He'll make his decision on Saturday this week. What are you hearing on David Stone?
Well, Cooper, as you know, you just put out your 2026 rankings, that initial top 100. David Stone was high in our initial top 100 for this 2024 class. He was one of the first prospects to emerge nationally this cycle, and Oklahoma was in great position back then. They're in great position now, and you talk to sources around Norman. I think they've always felt good about where they stand with David Stone, Oklahoma native that's been on campus numerous times. Sister goes to school there. He's told me in the past he has a really good relationship with Todd Bates. He likes the trajectory of this program under Brent Venables and the experience that this defensive staff has. He says that they have the experience to win national championships. I think he likes the way that they've recruited at Oklahoma. And so it's a program that has been a crystal ball favorite for a long time going into this announcement. Now, Michigan State has had momentum at various points in this recruitment, went to 2 games there in the fall, talked to a source around East Lansing on Monday morning, and they feel like they're still in the thick of it for David Stone. And then certainly Miami, the wild card, right? They've had him on campus several times this calendar year already. They're a program that he said at IMG Media Day that Miami's his family's favorite place to be. He talks to that coaching staff every day. There's probably not a program recruiting him harder. Miami has tried to put a major emphasis on defensive line recruiting this cycle. They've had some good wins. Elias Rudolph flipping him from Michigan most recently, but David Stone would be a monster one here for Miami down the stretch. So to sum it all up, I like Oklahoma, but I still can't really rule out Miami or Michigan State here at the start of the week.
A lot of 5-stars coming off the board this week. Another up front in the edge, Jordan Ross, set to make his decision tonight. We don't have to wait long for that. But, Steve, what is your final call as we're just hours away from finding out where he goes?
Well, talking to Jordan Ross last week, talking to various sources with knowledge of the recruitment, I like where Tennessee stands coming into this one right here. You know, he said his best game day experience was watching the Vols knock off Alabama last year. I think that also showed him the trajectory of the program, what that program's capable of. He certainly knows what Rodney Garner is capable of. He's built a great rapport with him. He likes the way that Tennessee is recruited across the board. He pointed out the Nico Iamaleava, just having that franchise quarterback to come in after Joe Milton is big for him. And then another guy I want to mention is LaVorne Harbin. They call him Coach Chop. Talk to some sources around the program that say that he has been the main guy that's built a great relationship with Jordan Ross. So I think that people feel good about Tennessee for Jordan Ross. I don't know if the hay's in the barn yet. Texas, he had a great visit to Texas. Loved that they got Colin Simmons. Maybe Texas can pull off a shocker here. Alabama in-state. I know that it's not going to be Florida. Not expecting Florida coming into tonight. I think that the Gators have moved on to other targets. But Tennessee seems to be in great position as they try and build on a recruiting class that ranks number 11 nationally.
The 4-star athlete Daniel Hill is set to make a decision on Wednesday. South Carolina and Shane Beamer, Nick Saban at Alabama. Those seem to be the 2 teams jostling right now for a position for Daniel Hill. What are you hearing going into his decision on Wednesday?
Well, I don't know if there's a prospect that's higher on South Carolina's offensive board collectively than where they've had Daniel Hill, a 6'1", 220-pound specimen, bruising running back that has all the traits to be one of the league's best at that position. Him and his family have built a great relationship with Montario Hardesty. He's been to South Carolina numerous times, and I feel like this one is trending their way, but you can't sleep on Alabama, their running back tradition. He's been to Tuscaloosa a ton during his process. Robert Gillespie leading the charge for Alabama there. You can't rule out the Tide.
Speaking of offense, let's talk about some of the big guys. How about modern day's Brandon Baker? You got Georgia, Ohio State, Texas, Nebraska, Miami, all of them chasing the top offensive tackle in the nation. What's the latest with him?
Yeah, I'm expecting Brandon Baker to make his college decision sometime here early in the fall. And I feel like we've had some change at the top of the board. For a lot of his process, we pointed towards Oregon and said, hey, we think that the Ducks are an outstanding position for Brandon Baker. And they're still on a short list, and maybe they rise back up. But the school I'm really keeping an eye on right now is the Texas Longhorns. There's been a lot of confidence around the Texas program, particularly since they had him on campus for an official visit this summer. Kyle Flood and what he's done at the position, the way Texas has recruited the offensive line position under Steve Sarkisian has been incredibly impressive. And I think that Brandon Baker can really see himself at Texas, a program that has certainly shown that they're on the rise under this coaching staff going into this season. Now, Ohio State, that's been some of his favorite visits, talks to Justin Fry and company regularly over there in Columbus. I would probably put them in the two-hole right now for Brandon Baker. And then Nebraska, they're the wild card. They're the dark horse right now. They're going to get an official visit from him in September. And people say that they're a program that has a lot of runway in this recruitment for Brandon Baker. But as we talk today, I think I would give the edge to Texas.
Steve, let's go to 2025, and let's stick with the big dogs. David Sanders, the #1 player in the 2025 class out of Providence Day in Charlotte, protecting the blind side of Michigan commit Jaden Davis. He's been on a couple of visits already. This is a guy that's obviously highly coveted. What are you hearing with David Sanders and his recruitment?
Well, this elite prospect is beginning to line up his fall visits, and one program that he's definitely going to get back to is Alabama. Had a great visit with them at the end of the summer. Looking to get to that Alabama-Texas game this fall. That is going to be 5-star central for that Alabama-Texas game early in the season. David Sanders expected back there on his latest visit. Got a lot of time with Coach Saban. Coach Wolford was attached at the hip with him and his family. And Alabama is certainly a program that's made a big impression on David Sanders. He's also going to get back to Michigan. His last visit of the summer was the barbecue at the Big House. Michigan was the first program to offer him. Now he has over 30 opportunities. Him and his family sat down with Jim Harbaugh in his office for a long time. Really enjoyed Michigan. That's a program that he fits in on and off the field. He's going to get back for the Ohio State game at the end of the season. Also wants to get back to Georgia and get back to Clemson. Those are probably the two programs I would point to right now. If I was handicapping this recruitment, I would say Georgia and Clemson are in the best position going into the season. But you have Alabama that is certainly impressed. He wants to get back to Tennessee, pointing towards the Georgia game this fall as a return trip to Tennessee. But there's a lot of contenders in this one, a lot of game visits this fall for David Sanders and his family.
Love it, Steve. We have come to that point in the segment where I have to ask. He already knows. I don't even have to ask Steve. I'm just asking you, the audience, to hit that like button. We love to hear from you. Also, a reminder to subscribe to the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. We have a big commitment coming up. We talked about Eddrick Houston earlier in the show. I forgot to tell you that he will be coming on the 24/7 Sports YouTube page to make his official announcement tomorrow. So you're going to want to make sure that you are subscribed. But enough about him. Let's ask about a quarterback prospect that you saw in person at Lucas Oil this weekend. That's Colorado 2024 quarterback commit Danny O'Neal. He led Cathedral to a 55-14 win over Lafayette Jefferson. So what stood out about his performance?
Well, Cathedral, they got one of the best high school football teams in the country this season. He broke off a 67-yard touchdown run in the first half. Also had a 33-yard scoring strike there to a tight end there, Zach Meeks, going to Miami, Ohio. He might get some sniffs as his senior year goes on. But Danny O'Neal, one thing about him, he's a 3-year starter. He has never lacked confidence. He's a good teammate. He's a dual threat player at the position, makes fantastic decisions with the football. He's accurate. He's smart. And he was one of Sean Lewis, Colorado's offensive coordinator's top targets at the position, visited several times. And he's excited to be part of this Colorado recruiting class. He says they have an underdog mentality in Boulder. He has an underdog mentality himself. He won a state championship as a sophomore, looking to return to Lucas Oil at the end of this season to win another Thanksgiving weekend. But Colorado getting a guy that is smart, knows where to go with the football, is accurate with it, and he's really improved his arm talent over the last 3 years.
All right, Steve, let's get a little crazy with it. 2026 running back Messiah Mickens. He made his decision over the weekend. He's going to play for James Franklin in Penn State. Long way to go in this one, but one of the top running backs in the 2026 class. What can the Nittany Lions faithful look forward to with Messiah Mickens?
Well, this is a young man with anywhere from 4.4 to 4.5 speed in the 40-yard dash, depending on who's holding the watch. And he's got game-breaking speed when he's out in space, and he can also catch the football. Cooper, we saw him at the All-American Bowl National Combine back in January in San Antonio. He was a very tough cover in that setting for linebackers. Had a fantastic freshman season, rushed for roughly 900 yards, had over 1,000 total yards when you tack in the receiving yards, and Penn State had him in camp. He's worked with Jawan Sider in that setting, and he says, I'm next. Talked to him after he committed. He said it's that running back tradition at Penn State that he loves. He got a chance to visit places like Notre Dame, Texas A&M, Norman, Oklahoma, and the Sooners, but nothing ever gave him the feeling like Penn State did. So he figured, let's jump in now, continue to build something special. And Penn State got themselves another potential special player at a position that they've really crushed in the James Franklin era.
Steve Wiltfong, pleasure as always, my friend. Good to see you. See you soon, right?
Yes. I'm
So
in
looking
Nashville
forward to
soon.
If you enjoy Steve's work and the rest of the work of our team at 24/7 Sports, make sure to go to 247sports.com as the college football season is right around the corner.
The official Buford debut of the top overall prospect, Dylan Raiola, went down Friday night. Now the stats, they won't jump off the page. 13 of 24 for 185 yards and 2 touchdowns in an 18-0 win. But what did we learn about number one in week 1? Let's find out from our friend Ben Wolk of Dawgs247 joining the show now. Ben was actually there. You got to see Dylan Raiola, the man, the myth, the legend, in person. And Ben, I got to ask you, what impressed you most about what you saw out of him?
I'd seen Dylan play a couple of times in practices, last week's scrimmage, but I really wanted to see how is he going to perform in a nationally ranked matchup against a team like St. Francis. They're loaded on the defensive side themselves, so I was curious, how did he really show up in his first big-time high school football in the state of Georgia? And I think what I saw was, to your point, not a stat line that's going to blow you away, 185 yards, 2 touchdowns. He was really efficient when they asked him to be in the red zone. But I think my biggest thing coming in was where there might have been some question marks about Dylan's game, right? Like, if you're the number 1 overall player in the country, we have to start nitpicking where things might be. And I think a lot of the questions came around his mobility in the pocket or just his mobility in general. And I really came away impressed. The pocket broke down a lot over the course of the game, and he was sacked a couple of times, but his ability to get himself out of pressure, keep his eyes downfield, make some plays, really stood out to me. And then when it got late in that game, you know, Buford's a team that runs the ball more than they pass the ball, and he's only 2 months into his time as Buford's quarterback, and I think they've really implemented some things into their offense that they wouldn't ordinarily have in their offense, but because they have Dylan Raiola, they certainly wanted to do so. And late in the game, they were up 2 scores, and you'd think that they'd just be running out the clock to finish it out, and they actually put the ball in Dylan's hands to push the ball down the field, and he hit a couple of deep shots late in the game to ice the game away, and that told me a lot about how Buford feels about the quarterback that they have in place there right now, what they expect to do with him this season in the state of Georgia. And so I really did come away impressed with Dylan and just his overall composure and how he handles himself in the pocket.
All right, Ben, let's talk a little bit about KJ Bolden. Even though he's committed to Florida State, he's the number 1 safety in the land. He's a number 11 player overall per the 24/7 Sports rankings. I mean, this is a guy that this had to hurt Kirby Smart, losing him and getting out of state. What does the push look like for the Georgia Bulldogs when it comes to KJ Bolden over the next couple months? We all know it's a long way until signing day.
Yeah, well, for starters, when you watch KJ Bolden play, he leaves no questions as to why Ohio State, Alabama, Georgia were after him as long as they were, and why they will continue to recruit him until the end of his recruitment. And, you know, he scored a touchdown, a receiving touchdown from Raiola in that game. He also had a pick 6 that was called back because of a hold, but he really can do everything that you ask him to do. Actually, Cooper, this might be more for you than for me, but he actually looked over at one point and said, I'm an athlete. I'm not a receiver, or I'm not a safety. Let's get it right. So that might be more something for you than for me, but he wants to make that known. That's how he feels about things. And I think because of what he brings to a football field, everybody's going to recruit him until the end. He said to me that he continues to hear from all of the teams that were in his top 5. I don't think that's a surprise to anyone because he is the top safety in the country. And so Georgia's going to recruit him into the end. I think that my bigger question is how much success anybody's going to have in flipping him. I saw him right when I saw him on Friday. He gave me the tomahawk chop immediately. I mean, he's very firm in his commitment to Florida State right now. That said, he'll be watching this season just like everybody else will, and everybody will continue to recruit him. So I don't think that anybody's going to have much luck in flipping KJ Bolden, but they're certainly going to give it a try until signing day.
You mentioned the pick six. We're going to talk about that a little bit, but I got to let you have your word. What do you think about this? He's trying to, get on offense.
I get it. What do you have? He had a touchdown, a pick six, right? I mean, if you do that, you're on a national stage. You can do whatever you want. Call me out as much as you want. You're one of the best players in the country.
Yeah, he can do whatever he wants, and clearly it is working well for him. But seeing him in person, we're talking about just how unique he is and that he's able to play kind of both sides of the ball. But just from your perspective, down at the field level, how special of a talent is this guy?
Yeah, well, not only is he a great player, which is obvious, and you're seeing some of the clips right now of what he's able to do on the field, but really his leadership is what separates him to me. I mean, this is a team full of alphas. I mean, if you look at Buford and what they have, they've got a lot of high FBS talent in the current class and future classes, and really everyone gravitates to KJ Bolden on that team. He really is the vocal leader. He's the one that everybody turns to when things are tough, and so that's what really impresses me about him. It goes without saying, he can play defense, he can play offense, he's going to make an impact at every level, he can get involved in the return game, but really it's that among this group of guys that are all going and playing next level football, they really turn to KJ Bolden as their leader on the team, and I think that says a lot.
And we talked a little bit about Eddrick Houston earlier in the show, 5-star out of Buford as well, but he wasn't the only one making a lot of noise on that defensive front on Friday night. Who else stood out for Buford?
Yeah, Andrew Ivins and I were both there, and we were both, if there was one guy that we were probably most impressed by, it was Bryce Perry-Wright. He's a 2026 defensive lineman, but if you throw on the tape and you see 0 on one side, look for 3 on the other side, because he's going to be doing just as much as Eddrick Houston is for that Buford defense this year. He was an Adidas freshman All-American. He really makes an impact in the game throughout the course of it. He has a super high motor. I'm excited to see what his ceiling can become. And, he's a guy that I'm going to be watching very, very closely. He has a lot of offers already, but I expect to see that offer list shoot up here over the next couple of months once he gets some sophomore year tape out there.
How do you know what to look for? There's so much talent in the game that you watched on Friday. I hope you have a notepad or something keeping tracks, because I've got a question about 4-star linebacker and current Georgia commit Jaden Perlotti, also shining for Buford. He has been locked in with the Dogs since December. We feel pretty good about him, but are there crystal ball flips out there right now? Perhaps he could follow KJ Bolden to Florida State? I mean, what are you hearing right now?
It's definitely something to watch. He has a very close relationship with KJ Bolden. In fact, prior to KJ Bolden making his commitment, he said that he and KJ had always planned to play college football together. Now that KJ Bolden's committed to Florida State and he's committed to Georgia, I think that made people raise their eyebrows a little bit and say, is there something more to the Florida State stuff with Jaden Perlotti? Because he had a lot of independent interest in Florida State prior to KJ Bolden's decision as well. This isn't what people want to hear. It's the cop-out answer, but I really do see it as a 50-50 thing right now, whether he sticks in Georgia's class or whether he doesn't. He's in constant communication with Georgia's defensive coordinator, Glenn Schumann, and they are in regular talks about the recruiting chaos that has sort of come to be for Jaden Perlotti. He knows that there's a lot going on. Schumann has told him, take it easy, think about things, enjoy your junior season, and then figure it out after the fact. I definitely think Ohio State, Alabama, Florida State, obviously, and then Southern Cal are really the schools that are making him think about his Georgia commitment the most. But as of right now, he remains in Georgia's class, but it's certainly something to watch going forward with a lot of time left in his recruitment.
Ben, it's hard to criticize a class that's ranked number 1 in 2024, but when you look at it, you take a step back. Sammy Brown, he's off to Clemson, right? Williams-Nwaneri, he's off to Missouri, and then KJ Bolden, we just talked about him. He's off to Florida State. So how has this class turned out from where your expectations were at the start of the cycle?
Well, I think, and we hear this a lot in the Georgia sphere. Georgia fans expected you win 2 national championships in a row. You're just supposed to get every single recruit that you want. And as we all learn, that's not exactly how the recruiting game works. There's a lot more nuance to the relationships built and things like that go into some of these recruitments. So I think when you look at some of the misses, it can feel like a little bit of a gut punch because you don't get Williams-Nwaneri, you don't get KJ Bolden, that Sammy Brown. There's other top guys that you were really in it for, that you were chasing heavily. I don't necessarily look at it that way because you're getting the number 1 class. I assume they will end with the number 1 class. I think that they have a lot of other pieces that are still out there in this recruiting class too. So when you look at LJ McCray from mainland Florida, you look at Aiden Breland from Mater Dei, you look at Cam Michael from Statesboro, Georgia. I mean, there's a lot of defensive talent still left out there for Georgia to land. Chris Cole is a guy from Salem, Virginia, a linebacker that will make his decision in September as well. And so when you look at what the forecast can still be for what Georgia can add, it's going to be an unbelievable class. Is it going to be the number 1 overall class in 24/7 sports history? Maybe not, but I think there's a really high likelihood it's Georgia's best one ever, which would be indicative of winning 2 national championships in a row. So again, it's a different world that we're in a little bit. There are certain other factors that play into some of these recruitments that make you have to be strategic with how you're aligning your classes together. And I think Georgia's had to face some of that, even though they have won 2 national championships in a row.
100%. We were talking about it earlier today. NIL, of course, a factor now too. You have to make some decisions on your roster. So it's hard to nitpick the number 1 overall class, but we do appreciate the perspective, Ben. Thank you so much for being here. If you want some of his great work, head to Dawgs247.com. They have everything that you could possibly need to know all about Georgia football and recruiting. Once again, Dawgs247.com. It is time now for our plays of the weekend. I'm going rogue and I'm calling this Friday's Top 5. Let's check it out. At number 5, we head out west. That is where Stanford quarterback commit Elijah Brown, check it out here, got a quick release. He's about to get blasted, but finds the uncommitted 3-star wide receiver Marcus Brown. Just a beautiful 23-yard touchdown for number 1 Mater Dei to top number 15 Centennial. Brown now 30-1 as a starter.
I love this kid so much. Every time you turn on the tape, he's just a gamer, right? I think he took a little bit of a step back when we saw him live in LA at the Elite 11 finals. He might not blow you away with all the physical traits, but this is a guy, he's played 31 games. He's still got his senior season left, right? He's just a winner. That's what I love about Elijah Brown. Off to a good start here in 2023.
Quite a bit of talent on that roster. All right, coming in at number 4, Utah quarterback commit Isaac Wilson with just a beautiful ball to wide receiver Tate Kayer. That touchdown, one of many touchdowns for both teams in this one, but Wilson's corner Canyon ultimately falling 63-42 to number 2 Bishop Gorman.
You can knock the height on Isaac Wilson, but every time you turn on the tape, I mean, this is a guy who makes play after play after play. You see the stat line right there, 369 yards, 3 touchdowns. He had his team in it in the first half. Bishop Gorman ran away with it in the second half, but I like Isaac Wilson. I think Utah's got something here. I want to keep my eyes on him. I'm excited to see him and his senior season play out.
Comes from a good bloodline of quarterbacks, too. All right, let's go to number 3, and back east we head. That's Texas running back commit Jarrett Gibson with the rock right now. He's got a sight set on the end zone. I think you can imagine if it's a top play, he gets there. That is for number 4 IMG Academy. He's the nation's number 2 back, helping his team to a victory over number 19 here in town, Lipscomb Academy.
This guy made some money in my book. I was at this game and he ran so strong, and it was just kind of brick by brick by brick, and he finally broke 2 long runs, and obviously he's playing behind a big physical offensive line at IMG, but I love the way he plays the game. You talk about Tashard Choice, running back coach at Texas. He's making a name for himself as one of the best position coaches in all of college football. I like Jarrett Gibson. I think he's going to be able to play and see the field early in Austin.
You were there. It seems like the whole city of Nashville was there. Look at all the people coming out for some Friday Night Lights. We love to see it. Let's go to our number 2 play, the top prospect in the nation, Dylan Raiola in action. But how about on defense, though? KJ Bolden here, we mentioned it, picking off Oregon quarterback commit Michael Van Buren and taking it to the house. Buford tops St. Francis Academy 18-0. A weird score, Coop.
Safety, receiver, athlete, whatever, man. Whatever you want to be, I'll give it to you. This guy is a baller. I love what Mike Norvell and Florida State is getting with him. I love his instincts on the defensive side of the ball, but he's fun to watch offensively as well. I think him and Dylan Raiola, they're going to be really, really fun to watch. We saw that on Friday night against St. Francis Academy. He's all over the place. And like Benjamin Wolk said, this is a recruitment we got to keep our eye on.
Okay, take note of that. Let's go to our number 1 play this week. Number 14, Langston Hughes, led by Ohio State quarterback commit Aaron Nolan, rolling to the left, finding some space, and hitting 2025 wide receiver Giovanni McGee in the back of the end zone. That was for the lead and ultimately for the win.
This guy's special. I don't know what it is about him, but every time you're around him, whether it's in person, whether you're turning on the tape, you learn a little bit more and more about him, the more you like him, right? And then you turn on this game, national spotlight, his team needs it the most, and that's when he shows up. I love Aaron Nolan. You talk to the guys at Ohio State, what do they like the most about him? It's not his arm talent, it's not his accuracy. He's a winner. That's what he does, and we talked about this game, Aaron Nolan just continuing to do what he does. Want to know.
It's that. That's what you like, those late game changing plays. We love to see it. Hey, those are our top plays of the weekend.
This guy is a blur on tape. He zigs and zags.
He's a player to potentially make an impact from day one.
Why have one recruit of the weekend when you can have 2? We make the rules. This week, it's future of Michigan's backfield and quarterback Jaden Davis and running back Micah Kaapana. First, Davis throwing for 450 yards and 5 touchdowns in Providence Day's 42-35 win. Meanwhile, his future teammate ran for 232 yards and added 3 touchdowns, and he's not getting the ball every single snap. That's just on 12 carries of work in Bishop Gorman's 63-42 win over Corner Canyon. A lot to be excited about if you're a Michigan fan. My question to you, though, is what we saw this weekend, how is that potentially a preview of what's to come when they suit up for the maize and blue?
Who's the next guy after J.J. McCarthy, right? That's the question. I think if you're a fan of Michigan and the Wolverines, that's the question you got to be asking in Ann Arbor. And I think Jaden Davis, he's such a gamer, right? We talk about his ability in terms of the short to intermediate part of the field. He continues to show that. I actually thought he threw the long ball pretty well as well. So I like what Jaden Davis did. That's a little bit more of the same. Micah Kaapana as well. I mean, you talk about a guy very explosive, 4.48 on the laser. We saw that, super productive, and you got to give Mike Hart, Michigan staff, running back coach over there, he does a tremendous job. So you think about J.J. McCarthy, and I think a lot of people think of how talented a passer he is, and that's true, but he's also got the running element as well. And then you have guys like Blake Corum, Donovan Edwards. They've done a really good job in that room. I think now it's starting to figure out who's next. I think they have that here with Jaden Davis and Micah Kaapana.
Some really great talent in Michigan's future. We're transitioning now to viewer questions. We did not plan this, but the first viewer question, it's a good thing we talked so excitedly about Michigan because it's a tough one. Tyler wants to know what your reaction is to the Harbaugh suspension and what it means to Michigan moving forward.
Great question. I don't think much of it, right? And I think a lot of it for a couple other reasons. I think Michigan, the administrators probably got involved at some point with Coach Harbaugh and said, hey, let's take our medicine here. It's 3 games, 2023. We don't want this to drag out. East Carolina, UNLV, Bowling Green, right? Those are your first 3 weeks of the season in 2023. If you're going to do it, now is the time to do it. So I think it was more of a timely scenario for Jim Harbaugh and the Wolverines to make this decision. I think it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, this was a self-imposed. Initially, he was given a 4-game suspension. The 4th game, I'm not going to say was going to be challenging necessarily, but now it goes down to a 3-game suspension, but that is self-imposed. We'll see what the NCAA has to say about that. All right, our next question is coming from somebody you might have heard of. Our friend, Blair Angulo, he's not just answering your questions, he's asking questions to you, Coop, saying, if Jordan Ross picks Tennessee, like Steve said, what would he bring to Knoxville?
Well, this is a guy who kind of reminds me a little bit of Brian Burns. If you don't know who Brian Burns is, all-pro with Carolina Panthers, played at Florida State, American Heritage before that, and was a guy who was a little bit of a late bloomer in the process physically, but 6'4.5", 218 pounds. You look at Jordan Ross, he's got the basketball background. He still needs to fill out. And here's the thing, with 5-star come a lot of expectations, but to me, Jordan Ross is going to be one of those guys. He's either going to get on the field situationally as a freshman, or he's going to need a redshirt year, and that's okay. I think for him, it's all about long ball. It's going to be 2 to 3 years until he physically matures, develops into the position. But in terms of the developmental upside, I mean, he is dripping of first-round talent. So I'm excited about him. That's what pays off when you get into a Power 5 strength conditioning nutrition program, and I think that's where he's really going to benefit.
Big picture, you look at this Tennessee offense and you think, who wouldn't want to be a part of that? I mean, they've produced so many great wide receivers. You see what Hendon Hooker was able to do last year and transitioning that into being picked in the NFL draft. From a defensive standpoint, though, what would a win like this mean for what Josh Heupel's building?
It's big. He's in Birmingham, Alabama, right? I mean, that's a big one. So to be able to go into that part of the country and potentially pull out a guy like Jordan Ross, but it's big in a lot of ways because they set themselves up really well in the fact that David Hobbs out of North Carolina last year, a guy that was really right on that fringe of 5-star status, Chindavian Bradley out of Missouri, and then you think about Caleb Herring as well, and then they've recruited the back end and the secondary really well. I love so much what Tennessee is doing defensively, and it's so easy to get caught up in the offensive fireworks and how they're recruiting offensive. But if they're going to win at the highest level, not only the SEC, on the national scale as well, it's going to be because of their defense. They've addressed that over the last 2 years. They don't get enough credit, in my opinion.
Yeah, and those guys playing on defense are playing a lot of snaps, so you definitely need to make sure you've got your energy rolling there. All right, our friend Chris wants to know, we know how projectable Raiola is and how much upside he has, but where do you see him fitting into the quarterback room when he gets into Athens in January?
That's a great question. I love so much of the physical traits of Dylan Raiola, and you saw it on Friday night. You also see where he needs to improve a little bit. I think that's more of command, right? It's taking what is given to you by the defense, and I think, hey, not every play has to be one where we go for the long ball, right? Checking down, understanding, hey, when's it time to make the safe play? So for him, I think Dylan Raiola is a guy that needs reps. I think him being at Buford is huge for his development going forward. And I think he's going to need a year, not from a physical standpoint, but from a rep standpoint, to sit behind a talented quarterback room in Athens and really develop and get the nuance and really kind of, I guess, acclimate to the speed of SEC defenses as well.
Yeah, and it's such a luxury when you have that opportunity. If you have a quarterback already in place for somebody to come in and learn. We've seen this before with the number 1 overall prospect. When it's a quarterback, I'm not sure if we'll be seeing Arch Manning playing a whole lot of football this year, but definitely a luxury for him to be able to sit back and learn and kind of ease that transition. That's all the viewer questions that we have. We have one more thing to tell you. Eddrick Houston will be making his official commitment right here on the 247 Sports YouTube channel. He's deciding between Alabama, Clemson, the aforementioned Georgia, Ohio State, USC, some top programs. Where will the 5-star land? You can find out right here on the 247 Sports YouTube channel. Another reminder that to make sure that you are subscribed because a lot of stuff happens on this channel. So hit that subscribe button, hit that like button on the way out. But for Cooper Patagna, I'm Emily Proud, and this is the College Football Recruiting Show.